All right, part two, how I close cases. You got to understand this as well. Bring this to the court's awareness that Title 42, 674, payments to states. If they're collecting child support, majority of that money is not going to the mother or the child. In fact, most fathers who pay child support, they still give additional monies to the mother and the child, or sometimes just the child. So where is the money going? And if it is going somewhere, is that illegal? And if it is illegal, how are they getting away with it? Remember, in part one, we talked about the APA, Administrative Procedures Act of 1946. They are utilizing a sort of constitution, not the real one, a fake sort of constitution, and are getting away with it. They are getting away with it. I want you to read this section here and you tell me what you think. Right, here we go. Section B, 75% of so much of such expenditures, including travel and per diem expenses as care for the short-term training of current or prospective foster or adoptive parents or relative guardians, the members of the staff of state licensed or state approved child care institutions providing care, or state licensed or state approved child welfare agencies providing services to children receiving assistance under this part. Let's continue. The staff of abuse and neglect courts. What is that? You will never find those two terms in any of your constitutions prior to 1933. This is where they have you, and this is the jurisdiction that you have given to them because you did not state you want to be tried in a common law court backed by your express trust. All sorts of agencies coming from an abuse and neglect court is how they are taking advantage of collecting for the state. That is the problem. Everyone is enriching themselves off of your hard-earned money, and that is a conflict of interest when it comes to the three branches of government. You cannot pay towards any agency, and that is how you're going to shut this down. A lot of people are talking about processing the UCC-1 financing statement to perfect their security interests within a certificate of title, which is their birth certificate, in order to discharge debts or issue financial instruments. That is not the case. That is not how this works. When you read the UCC law itself, it tells you that a financing statement is not necessary nor effective. Let me show you. Section A, except as otherwise provided in subsection D, the filing of a financing statement is not necessary or effective to perfect a security interest in property subject to. So what do? Go down to section 2, it says list any statute covering automobiles, trailers, mobile homes, which is your house, boats, farm tractors, or the like, which provides for a security interest to be indicated on a certificate of title as a condition or result of perfection, here it is, and any non-uniform commercial code filing. Now, what is that? Go to your Secretary of State website. That is that little box right there, non-UCC filing. You must check that. That's the trick. You must take the overall UCC-1 financing form, which is this entire thing, but in box 6B, you must check. That is how you register the real lien. You must register the lien within the organic public record. That's down at the county office in the Registrar of Deeds section. Then you must reference that lien with the Secretary of State. Now, the filing of a UCC-1 financing statement is not sufficient or enough to become some type of private banker or have the ability to issue financial instruments for discharge, there's more to it. You must record an actual lien, which is a promissory note that the foreign trust, the creditor, has over the debtor. You must record that with your Secretary of State. Then you must obtain a permit from your state's banking regulatory system. For example, in the state of Florida, section 609.05, before any person may offer for sale, barter, or sell any unit, share, contract, or note, such as a promissory note, you first must obtain a permit from the Office of Financial Regulation of the Financial Services Commission. Then you will be able to offer up such securities. Follow for part 2.
By law, your body, your physical body is a corporation. So when you die, you're a corpse, because when you're living, you're a corporation. Words and terms are based on maritime admiralty, the law of water. It's an extraordinary story about how governments rule the world. And unless you understand this, you're never going to figure out what's going on. Where do you find banks? You find banks on the side of a river. So what does a river bank do? It directs the flow of the current, because your currency is the cash flow, the liquid asset. And so money goes through your hands like water. No, money is water. It's the flow. As much money as you print, you've got to take some back in to make it valuable. The tide goes out, it's got to come back in. Money goes out, money comes in.
London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the First Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America, stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings, and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words "In God We Trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the President is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the President is President of the Corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen, and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another Crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square.